Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rebuttal podcast, where we break down case law, calamity, and of course, chaos in the legal field. I'm once again your host, Reb Maisel, and today's case has everything I could ever dream of, right? I love a case that sounds unbelievable. I absolutely adore a situation, a narrative that has occurred sometime in our past where people look me dead in the eyes and go, no, that there's no way. And I say, there is. If there's a will, there's a way. And this one lands squarely into that category, and I love it so much. You could tell this case, story, narrative, fable that ended up being true to your friends at parties, and it wouldn't even be a wet blanket. You wouldn't even be a weirdo. I'd be interested. If you brought this up to me at a party, I'd be like, right now, me and you, we're hanging out. Top off my martini. Let's have a chat. You guys are going to like this one. And in addition to it being absurd, it also accidentally is like the most American fucking shit I could ever tell you guys about. It's the most American thing that could happen. And you'll find out, okay? You'll find out why I say that. I'm not sure if I'm more patriotic after knowing this story, but I'm definitely not less. So without further ado, let's get into it. And if you're watching on YouTube, yes, I look like Barney's personal assistant. Okay, this is like this. Okay, sweatshirt situation. It's a set. Okay, I look like I'm about to go bungee jumping. To be honest, like I look like a wiggle, one of the wiggles, and that's fine. That's gorgeous. That's fine. But I'm also getting my hair highlighted soon, like in 2 days. So this will be the last time you see these blonde pieces grown out down to my goddamn eyebrows. Let's get it going. Update, my cat will not stop meowing at the door, so I did indeed open that door so that he could simply walk in and then probably walk right back out. But the fact that it is blocked off from him is beyond his imagination. It's just beyond mentioning to him. It's reprehensible. So you'll see him in the background of this video. You're welcome. We love Simba. We love Simboob, right? My diva, producer, co-director, executive producer, if we're being serious. Okay, lay down. He's a big boy, huh? He's like a floofy, big-ass boy. He's on a special diet. Like, I don't know, like listen. I just had to get up and build him his little fort that he enjoys sleeping under while I record. He's running my life. It's fine. Not ruining, running. He's at the helm. I'm merely a passenger. Okay, let's go. On December 31st, 1918, Colonel Luke Lea of the 114th Field Artillery Regiment handed his commanding officer, General R.L. Spaulding, a request for leave from his dreary posting in Allied-occupied Luxembourg. Over a month prior, on November 11th, 1918, after more than 4 years of horrific fighting and the loss of millions of lives, the guns on the Western Front finally fell silent. Although fighting continued elsewhere, the armistice between Germany and the Allies that began on that day was the first step to ending World War I. The armistice happened on November 11th, okay? This is now December 31st. There is not fighting going on where Luke Lea is stationed, okay? We're gathering. Maybe that's why his request for a vacation on New Year's Eve in 1918 wasn't as hilariously audacious as I personally would have thought it would be. Apparently not. Colonel Luke Lea would not say where he was going or what he intended to do, though he assured the general he had nothing to worry about. Well, famous last words. General Spaulding called it the strangest request for leave he had ever read, but approved it anyway. After all, Luke Lea was not just an excellent officer, he was also a successful lawyer, newspaper publisher, and one-term senator from Tennessee. How much trouble could he possibly get into? A lot. A whole fucking lot. What Luke Lea, 3 other officers, and 3 enlisted men did would go down in history as legendary or just for most an urban legend, because back home, most people could not believe that it actually happened. It didn't seem real, but it was. It very much was. God bless. Thank God for that. Because if it weren't, then we wouldn't have this episode. But I fact checked, baby. This shit happened. This shit fucking happened. So let's get into what exactly their plan was and why it almost caused, well, it very much pretty much did cause an international incident. Luke Lea, 3 other officers, and 3 enlisted men piled into a rickety 7-seater Winton and headed north into Belgium toward the Dutch border, picking up an 8-cylinder Cadillac along the way. Casual. Luke Lea was just as tight-lipped with his men as he was with his commander, refusing to say where exactly they were going, only that there would be danger and excitement, which is never what you want to hear. I'm sorry. If I'm on leave, okay, if this is my vacation time and we just had an armistice, okay, guns down, I don't want to hear from my homeboy I'm going on a road trip with that it's going to be dangerous and exciting. How about peaceful and boring? I beg of you. We've been in the literal trenches, my guy. Why? But nope, they piled in. They piled the fuck in and they were like, hit the gas, baby. And what's interesting about this is that all of the men that Luke Lea chose to join him on this endeavor were from Tennessee. Because it was going to be a big trip. Okay, it was going to be a big trip. It was probably going to go down in Tennessee history. Okay, they were probably going to be hailed as heroes back home, which they very much were. They very much were, despite the fact that it didn't really go as planned. What exactly am I talking about? Well, this trip, okay, into Belgium toward the Dutch border is interesting because neutral Holland was officially off limits to Allied servicemen. But Lea pulled some strings with the U.S. minister to Belgium, a friend from his Senate days, and secured travel documents issued in the name of the Dutch Queen. One flash of the documents was enough for the border guards to salute and let them pass. It was only then, once they passed that border, that Lea revealed to his men the true purpose of their trip. They were going to kidnap the exiled Kaiser of Germany, Wilhelm II, and force him to stand trial as a war criminal. Yep, this band of Tennessean 7 dudes were going to use their few days off vacation to just kidnap the Kaiser, because I'm sure that hadn't been attempted before by any, major commission, top secret missions. No, they were going to do this off the record, off the books, in a clandestine clusterfuck, not sanctioned by anyone, especially not America. Because guess what we were in at that time? Talks after the armistice. Do you know what I'm saying? Squint, squint. Imagine that. On November 10th, 1918, the Germans received word that Kaiser Wilhelm II, all right, the guy who was at the helm of Germany this entire fucking time, he had abdicated. And there were instructions from the new government that was in place that Germany, yes, should sign the armistice. Okay, the Germans on the front, hey, sign that shit. You know what I mean? Kaiser's gone. Kaiser's out. Well, where did the Kaiser go? The Kaiser fled to the Netherlands. He said, I'm out. Goodbye. Love you so much. I'm going to neutral Netherlands. Okay, neutral Nethies, to basically live out my days, hopefully in peace, after stirring up that much fucking trouble. And of course you would think, well, there's no fucking way, right? He could do that. Well, he fucking did. Okay, he fucking did that shit. Despite the British post-war election call to hang the Kaiser, okay? Because of course people are like, you mean the leader of the people we've been fighting with? Like, yeah, we want to see somebody hang. Like that's and in the post-war, especially post-World War I, like propaganda time, like of course people are like, yes, this is the guy that we hate, right? For sure. But it wasn't just the British, it was also the French Prime Minister who said that a trial of the Kaiser would be one of the most imposing events in history and that the concept was well worthy of being pursued. Like they wanted to see a trial go down. They thought it would be a good thing, okay? Well, despite all that, Kaiser Wilhelm II, he had not been arrested, tried, or sentenced. He was chilling in the Netherlands, vibing. And by December 31st, okay, New Year's Eve, Luke Lea was pissed off about it. He was a nobody in the grand scheme of things. He didn't really have a leg to stand on to make a decision like kidnapping the Kaiser and making him stand trial on behalf of America, right? The United States of America by himself. He didn't really have that kind of pull at all. But listen, he's going to be confident, right? He's going to be real fucking confident, and he's going to be audacious, and he's going to think that his opinion matters more than in literally anyone else's. So he's going to go through with it. Of course he was. Okay, of course he was. Historians are still debating the degree of blame to place on the German emperor or Kaiser Wilhelm II for starting the First World War. It is clear from the records that he understood and feared the consequences of a European war. Nevertheless, as the head of state of the most powerful of what were called the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and Bulgaria, he was the focus of popular animus throughout the war. He was the figure in the editorial cartoons appearing in the publications of his opponents, France, Britain, Italy, Russia, and the US. Perhaps only Hitler was reviled by his enemies more than Wilhelm. When revolt in his country and exhaustion by his army forced his abdication in November of 1918, he fled to the Netherlands to go into exile in neutral Holland, okay? His first refuge was the unadorned 3-story brick castle at Amerongen belonging to Dutch Count Goddard Bentinck. The victorious countries, trapped by their wartime propaganda, which placed the blame for the entire war on Wilhelm, began to agitate for his arrest and trial. But no one was making moves. Okay, no one was making moves. Because again, we were still in talks. Despite the fact that an armistice happened, you gotta like put some shit out on paper, okay? We went to Paris and we were like, we need to figure this shit out, okay? And we're still figuring this shit out, especially, I don't know, December 31st, like a little over a month after the armistice happened and after Kaiser Wilhelm fled, all right, to exile, to go to Holland. Yeah, shit isn't hammered out, okay? Shit isn't hammered out. Holland refused to surrender the imperial refugee. That's how they saw him, okay? So they're like, we're not doing it. So you don't want to go to war with us, do you? Probably not. Everyone was like, probably not, right? This set the stage for Luke Lea to come the fuck in and craft this beautiful, unsanctioned, very dumb plan. But let's hear about Luke first, okay? Luke Lea, and Luke is his real first name, okay? It's not Luca, it's Luke. It's just Luke. Was 39 at the time, okay? This wasn't like an 18, 19-year-old, okay, running some dumbass fucking mission. No, like he was 39 and he had become a colonel by this time, okay? Luke Lea was born April 12, 1879 in Nashville, Tennessee. He was named before a great-grandfather of the same name and graduated from the University of the South at Sewanee and Columbia Law School in New York. So he's a lawyer. Red flags are flying. He returned to Nashville to practice law, but soon became interested in journalism, becoming the founder, editor, and publisher of the Nashville Tennessean. A Democrat, he was the last U.S. senator from Tennessee to be elected by the legislature as opposed to popular vote. That's how they used to vote for the senators at that time. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting. He was defeated by Kenneth McKellar and left office in early 1917. The United States declared war on Germany shortly thereafter. Now, I do want to pause. I do want to pause at his tenure in the publishing community, okay, right, where he bought the Tennessean and he's, you know, really embroiled in the newspaper world, where apparently, as these stories always fucking go, things get like cutthroat, bloodthirsty in the publishing world. I didn't know this. Embroiled, okay, in politics, newspapers, and result in murder in cold blood. But indeed it did. And this is before our boy was a colonel in the army in Europe, all right, serving for our country. He was embroiled in some fucking scandals. Once a scandal, always a scandaler. Put that on a gravestone. Or a t-shirt. While Luke Lea would practice law for a while, the law was never as interesting to him as the realm of newspaper publishing and politics. By 1907, Luke Lea had founded the Nashville Tennessean, with the first edition appearing on the streets on May 12th of that year, which was a Sunday. Lea was not only the publisher of the Tennessean, but its first editor as well. The Tennessean would remain one of Luke Lea's passions for the remainder of his life and embroil him in enough scandals for another 40 fucking years. I kid you not. The end case that I'm going to talk about with Luke Lea doesn't even have anything to do with him attempting to kidnap the Kaiser. I know. Say what you want about him, he was interesting. I'll give him that. He had his hand in a lot of cookie jars. The young publisher was deeply immersed in Tennessee's politics while running the Tennessean. In 1908, Tennessee Democrats were sharply divided, largely over the issue of prohibition. Governor Malcolm Rice Patterson was perceived to be willing to allow localities to determine their choices to spirits and alcoholic beverages by local option. A challenger to Governor Patterson emerged in former United States Senator Edward Ward Carmack. Carmack, okay, important name, by the tone of my voice, Carmack, a former newspaperman himself, had been a congressman and senator before losing his Senate seat in 1906. The rivalry between Governor Patterson and Senator Carmack was quite personal. Carmack had defeated Patterson's father, Colonel Josiah Patterson, to get to Congress in the first place. So everyone fucking the girls are fighting. Everyone fucking hates each other, okay? I love politics. Everyone's petty and dramatic. I'm sorry. E.W. Carmack, despite his facility with a pen, was also a very good speaker, which was helpful in any campaign long before television made courthouse speeches obsolete. With a busy head of fiery red hair to match his temperament, Carmack was popular and able and represented a genuine threat to Patterson's continued tenure. Both Patterson and Carmack disliked one another intensely, okay? And we all know where this is going. Lea backed Carmack, okay, our boy Luke, backed Carmack in the 1908 gubernatorial, I fucking hate that word, gubernatorial campaign, governor campaign, right? Carmack charged Patterson with being a tool of the liquor interests and, despite an intense campaign, lost narrowly to the incumbent who carried the more urban areas of the state, while Carmack did well in the more rural areas. Rural. I am fighting for my fucking life to speak normally today. But following his defeat, E.W. Carmack received an offer from Luke Lea to become editor of the Nashville Tennessean, okay? Carmack accepted Luke's offer, and it was not long before he gleefully dipped his pen and wrote scathing editorials bathing Governor Patterson and his friends in verbal acid. Now, this is written with some flair, obviously, what I'm reading from, but y'all, he basically TMZ'd the fuck out of this guy, okay, who just beat him in the governor race. Carmack fucking hated Patterson. He was just talking major fucking shit about him in these op-eds, okay? Carmack was like, amazing, I'm going to use this new job, not to like, you know, maybe move on with my life, you know what I mean? Maybe like distance myself from politics, but like focus on publishing and editing this wonderful newspaper, get after that, put my head down. No, he said, I'm going to use this just to talk shit, which I can admire. You know what I mean? Like petty levels on high. If you can't beat them, slander the fuck out of them. That was his thought process. And you know what? Like I can respect Kendrick Lamar hater levels, right? Like he did not quit. He was like, no, you may have beat me, but you're not going to get the last laugh. I'm going to clown the fuck out of you every week in the Sunday paper that you can read and all your friends will read and laugh at. Naturally, Governor Patterson disliked Carmack's editorials, but some of his friends resented the same editorials even more bitterly. So, like, his friends were like, you're my homie, I'm pissed, okay? Colonel Duncan B. Cooper, not to be confused with D.B. Cooper, the guy who hijacked that plane and no one found him ever again. Maybe this is the guy, who knows? Once, one of E.W. Carmack's patrons at the Nashville American newspaper had insisted the editor stop maligning Governor Patterson in print. Carmack ignored Cooper's demand, and some of the former senator's friends were so worried, they begged him to carry a pistol whenever he went out. So they were like, yo, like, we love the fact that you're stirring up drama and writing all of this gossip in your op-eds in the newspaper, but like, people are gonna kill you. Patterson has some friends in high places who fucking hate your ass. And Carmack was like, okay, fine. So he heeded the advice of his friends, and he did indeed carry a pistol with him, okay, from then on. But that advice may well have cost him his life. We'll see why. According to an account printed in the New York Times just days following Carmack's death, the editor had been warned that Colonel Cooper was profoundly angry and had demanded in no uncertain terms Carmack never use his name in print again. Carmack loftily dismissed Colonel Cooper's complaint, saying, quote, "You go tell Colonel Cooper for me that I have heard of his boasts and threats before, but neither of them affects me. I shall use his name whenever I think the occasion demands and as I think proper," end quote. I'm sorry, he's messy as hell. Like, he is a teenage girl. That is like, that's great. I'll use his name whenever I think the occasion demands and as I think proper. Like, that kind of eats down. I mean, it did lead to his death, but it does kind of, listen, he has swagger. I kind of like that. But like, he dies for it. On November 8th, 1908, Carmack encountered an irate Colonel Cooper on a Nashville street, along with Cooper's son, Robin. Both Carmack and the younger Cooper were armed, and evidently Carmack, fearing for his life, opened fire. Okay, a little trigger happy, a little too trigger happy. He shot first, slightly wounding Robin Cooper. So this is Cooper's son. okay? Ugh. The younger Cooper fired back and proved to be the better marksman, hitting Cormac several times and killing him. The former senator lay dead in a Nashville gutter. The Coopers, both father and son, were tried for Cormac's murder, and Colonel Cooper was convicted while Robin Cooper was acquitted on a technicality. Governor Patterson enraged many Tennesseans when he pardoned the elder Cooper. Like drama, y'all. This is fucking drama. This is good old-fashioned American apple pie Cracker Jack drama. I'm sorry, it is. Patterson's single act in pardoning Colonel Cooper was the lit match that ignited open warfare inside Tennessee's Democratic Party. Give me the movie on this shit. I want the docuseries, Netflix. Listen. Get your ideas from my episodes and pay me a royalty. Please. The fight would become so bitter that it would cost the regular Democrats the governorship and both seats in the U.S. Senate. One of the prime beneficiaries of the discord inside Tennessee's Democratic Party would be none other than Luke Lea. He was the one who benefited from all of this strife. Why, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. The public outcry following Cormac's assassination was fanned by Luke Lea's newspaper, The Tennessean, as well as other newspapers across the state. The outrage crippled Malcolm Patterson's administration and derailed his bid for a third term in 1910. The disarray inside the Democratic Party was such that not even Senator Robert Love Taylor could hold the governorship for the party of Andrew Jackson. The party split into two factions. One was regular Democrats and the other were independent Democrats. The independent Democrats were those opposed to Governor Patterson and his administration. When the governor was still intent upon seeking yet another term, he fielded a slate of candidates for the Tennessee State Supreme Court. Many of the incumbent justices were seeking re-election, and offended, they announced they would run again as independent Democrats. So he's pissing everybody off. Patterson, seeing the handwriting on the wall, withdrew as a candidate, but his allies running for the Supreme Court lost as the independent Democrats had allied themselves with Tennessee Republicans. Thus was born the fusionist movement in Tennessee politics. The fusionists swept the elections in 1910, and a little-known Republican from Newport, Tennessee, Ben W. Hooper, was elected governor over Bob Taylor. The fusionists also won the Tennessee House of Reps. The independent Democrats and Republicans then combined to elect a dark horse, a man named Luke Lea. Just over 31 years old, Luke Lea was the youngest member of the United States Senate because, again, like I told you, the senators were not elected at that time by popular vote. They were literally elected by the people who were in the state legislature. So he was the last one. Luke Lea was the last one to be elected this way. So he joined the U.S. Senate. Luke Lea, this guy who had fanned the flames of our boy Cormac's pissed off loss by hiring him and encouraging him to write all these fucking op-eds talking shit about Patterson, who was Cooper's best friend. And then Cooper got to the point where Cooper was like, get my name out your mouth, get my boy's name out your mouth. And Cormac was like, bet, bitch, I'm gonna say it whenever I want to chew on it, actually. Whenever I feel it proper to chew on it, thank you. And then they got shot up in the street. And it led to Cormac dying. And Cooper being, tried, guilty, and then pardoned by Patterson, which caused all of this strife. Like, yes, it would be diabolically crazy, insane, absolutely time traveler type shit if Luke Lea literally had an entire map out on his wall of all of the things that needed to happen for him to become a U.S. senator. But if he did do that and this all paid off, then he's an evil genius. Because fuck, right? The amount of fucking things that had to happen for him to be elected over this is crazy town. But he was the last person to be elected this way, okay, by the legislature instead of by popular vote. But yeah, he joined the U.S. Senate, and he was there for pretty much 30 fucking seconds, okay, literally 5 seconds. He had I think one term, okay, and then he was out, and then war. Right? Amazing. But the Tennessean was always in the back. That was always a thing for him. All right. He ran that newspaper like a month. That was his child. That was his favorite thing. Okay. His favorite fucking thing. So there's some lore on Luke Lea. All right. I needed to give you that lore because what the fuck, right? What the fuck is going on, Tennessee? Y'all are crazy. But I love you. But you're crazy. But I love you so much. Okay. So where were we? Oh, yeah. As I was saying, he was a Democrat, all right, and he was the last U.S. senator from Tennessee to be elected by the legislature as opposed to popular vote. He was then defeated by a guy named Kenneth McKellar and left office in early 1917. The U.S. declared war on Germany shortly thereafter. Lea volunteered for the Tennessee National Guard and was made colonel of what became the 114th Field Artillery in the American Expeditionary Forces sent to Europe. They apparently arrived in England in the spring or summer of 1918, so he wasn't there for that long before his fun winter vacation occurred. Now, Luke Lea, while he was deployed abroad, kind of formed his plan to capture the Kaiser because of, yes, his hate for the Kaiser, okay, along with a lot of people's hate, as I talked about, all right? Everyone was like, fuck the Kaiser for real. That guy's a snake. Fuck him. Okay, for sure. And then he escaped, right? He went into exile in Holland, in the Netherlands, and people are like, what the fuck, right? Why isn't there justice here? But the reason why he was a little different is because Luke Lea wrote down, like, somehow, somewhere, his kind of thought process in thinking that this kidnap plan would even be worth it. Because if you really think about it, right, like, okay, you're gonna kidnap him. What now, right? And what about it? Like, what you have him, let's say you have him hog-tied in your trunk and you're in fucking Holland, right? What's the next move here? Do you want to kill him? Apparently, no. Apparently, that wasn't the goal. He wanted him to be tried, okay? Tried and punished. Okay, where's that going to be, King, right? Where is it going to be your tribunal? That's cute. You know what I mean? Like, where are you going to? So apparently, he thought, oh, if I just, like, take him to where the peace talks are happening, like the Armistice talks are happening in France, everyone's going to be like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, you found him. Let's put him on trial now. That was genuinely what he thought. Again, mediocre white dudes with audacity for miles and miles can think delusions and put them to action without just keeping them behind the prison cells of their mind, as most people do, right? Keep them behind the bars until a good idea comes up. Nope, we're going to stick to every stupid fucking plan we can conjure up because obviously I'm amazing and perfect and gorgeous and all of these things that I'm doing are novel, but also the world wants it. Okay, the world wants it. That's what he thought. For some reason, Luke assumed that the British government wanted to protect the Kaiser. Don't know why. He just did, okay? He also formed the opinion that the Allies had informally sanctioned Holland's offer of asylum for the Kaiser, but he also believed that the soldiers and peoples of the Allied nations hated the Kaiser so much that his delivery into the hands of any Allied chieftain would result in his trial and punishment. Furthermore, he thought even the German people would understand that they had been mistaken in their obedience to the ruler. Delusions. Like, these are all delusions of grandeur that should have, again, stayed as like a fun commentary with your buddies over some beers. Again, this is Armistice Time. No need to arm the stice, okay? Thank you. The armistice went into effect on November 11th, 1918. Shortly before that, the Kaiser had fled to Holland, but the war was not over, only the fighting. Although Germany was clearly beaten, there was a peace treaty to be arranged, and President Woodrow Wilson was coming to France to negotiate it with the British, French, and Italian leaders before forcing it on Germany's new government. Colonel Lea was inspired by the idea of kidnapping the Kaiser from his place of refuge and presenting him to Wilson for trial and punishment. Lea was due some leave, so he obtained it from his brigade commander for the period from January 1st through January 5th. So only, 5 days, maybe 4, with, quote, permission to visit any place not prohibited by orders from general headquarters, end quote, which is vague as fuck. That's why his commander was like, where are you going? He was like, don't worry about it. Anywhere that people say that we can. Or have not yet said that we can't. Like, that's crazy. That's worded fucking insane. That's worded like a lawyer, if you ask me. Luke's a fucking lawyer, bitch. Apparently, Lea himself worded the order to suit his plans, and when his general asked where he intended to go, he claims that he said that he didn't want to want the general to have responsibility for the trip. Of course, right? He's like, don't worry, I was trying to protect you. Like, okay, but like, this is an international incident, my guy. Like, you are acting on behalf of America. Like, no one's gonna believe that like we didn't sanction this. Like, this could throw everything into turmoil. Like, the armistice could be Armistice stopped. Okay, fuck. Luke Lea selected 7 of his men, all Tennesseans, to accompany him on the adventure without knowing what they were going to do. 3 of the men were officers, Captain Thomas P. Henderson of Franklin, Captain Leland S. MACPHAIL of Nashville, and First Lieutenant Ellsworth Brown of Chattanooga. The enlisted men were Sergeant Dan Riley of Franklin, Sergeant Ebert Hale of Nashville, Sergeant Owen Johnson of Franklin, and Corporal Marmaduke Clokey of Knoxville, okay? Henderson was a lifelong friend of Lea's, and MacPhail was supposed to be a, quote, accomplished linguist. Riley was an expert auto mechanic, and Johnston an unusual jack of all trades. Although warning them that the trip might be dangerous, Luke did not initially tell the men of his intentions, and none asked any questions, as people do sometimes, especially when you're in the military. You're like, listen, like, you say jump, I say already there, right? I'm high. High as fuck. So this is where things get very America. Oh, say, can you see stars, stripes? I can imagine eagles cawing and the flag flying and a baseball being thrown at someone's head right at this moment. Why, you may ask? Well, it doesn't just have to do with the fact that our boy Luke was very patriotic toward his own home state of Tennessee, right? He was like, my Tennessee boys know what's up. I don't trust any of you Yankee motherfuckers. Tennesseans, okay, are going on this trip. We're going to be known for it. The state of Tennessee, get behind me. And Tennessee was like, period, okay? Tennessee boys were like, we're pulling up. But mostly because of a man enlisted on this trip named Captain Leland S. MacPhail of Nashville. His name that he went by was Larry MacPhail. If you have ever watched or paid attention to baseball, American baseball, the Major League Baseball League, okay, MLB, Pie, Cracker Jacks, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, if you've ever paid attention to the history of it, you're probably thinking that name sounds familiar. Why? Well, Larry MacPhail, yes, this Larry MacPhail was an American lawyer and a major influential executive in Major League Baseball, the MLB. He served as a high-ranking executive, including club president and general manager with the Cincinnati Reds, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the New York Yankees, and was a one-third owner of the Yankees from 1945 through 1947. He's inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Like, if you look him up, it talks all about how, yeah, like, he is just an MLB, right? He was just so progressive. Like, he came up with all these amazing ideas of how the MLB would work, about how the leagues would work, And then there's always like a tiny little asterisk at the bottom that's like, oh yeah, and one time he tried to kidnap the Kaiser. I'm sorry. What's more American than baseball and kidnapping? I can't think of a goddamn other thing. Failed kidnapping, by the way. We got to have a fail in there. A big F letter. Also very American. We tried, and we try again. And we get it wrong a lot of time. But damn, do we do it with our stars and stripes flailing, waving. God, I love this country. God bless America. Larry MacPhail's involvement with the MLB and being a pioneer, okay, for baseball as we know it, happened after his discharge from military service, okay? He opened up a law office, again, lawyer, red flags, and then eventually purchased an interest in the Columbus Redbirds, a minor league affiliate of the St. Louis Cardinals, and then eventually worked his way up. He was hired by the Cincinnati Reds, became its chief executive and GM, okay, general manager. He also became a vice president and general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1938. Okay, down the line. You can look it up yourself. This motherfucker was ingrained in the sport, okay? He is in the Hall of Fame for a reason, but MacPhail was well known, okay, for his unpredictable behavior, which was fueled by bouts of heavy drinking. MacPhail's grandson, Andy, said, quote, "My grandfather was bombastic, flamboyant, a genius when sober, brilliant when he had one drink, and a raving lunatic when he had too many," which is hilarious. In one incident, MacPhail was drinking with the Boston Red Sox owner Tom Yawkey when the men decided to swap stars Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams in what would have been the biggest swap of baseball stars in many years. The men decided not to execute the trade after they sobered up. So listen, okay? Even if you knew nothing about what he did before his tenure in the MLB, okay, in baseball, back home, his temperament, right, tracks with him going on a clandestine mission to kidnap the fucking German Kaiser. Like, I'm sorry, like this kind of makes sense. In another quote, Leo Durocher, the Dodgers manager who had a tempestuous relationship with MacPhail, recalled, quote, "There is a thin line between genius and insanity, and in Larry's case, it was so thin you could see him drifting back and forth." So all of this tracks, okay? It fucking tracks. But so many people don't know that Larry MacPhail literally was one of the people who was on this mission years before he would be famous for his baseball endeavors. Crazy town. America. Let's keep going. Some accounts allege that Luke and his men were under the influence of, quote, too many glasses of rum punch and the enthusiasm of New Year's Eve in putting their enterprise into action. Lea's account modestly makes no reference to such intemperance, but other members of his merry band later wrote of the purchase of a quart of rum and 2 silver pitchers of hot water during a December planning outing, and a quart of Scotch whiskey in January after stopping at Maastricht in Holland during the actual attempt. So, like, they weren't sober. Let's call that what it is, right? Like, come on. I think it's not too much of a step and a reach to say that they were probably not good to drive during their kidnapping attempt in which they drove to. Okay? Amazing. Which can also make you so much more confident about this dumb fucking plan. A first expedition to capture the Kaiser took place from December 24th to 28th, 1918. So mind you, they tried this one time before. Blink, blink, blink. Yes, they did. Took place from December 24th to 28th, 1918, but was aborted at the Dutch border for the lack of documents allowing entry into Holland. Leaving their post in occupied Luxembourg, they had motored through snow-covered Belgium and Western Germany, only to be stopped at the machine gun and barbed wire festooned Dutch border. During this sprint, Captain Henderson noted that the Germans, quote, look more like real folks than the French or Belgians, and the towns look more like our towns, and the people more like our own people, end quote. So, like, he apparently thinks that, like, he hasn't fought the Germans enough to think, like, oh, maybe they're relatable. Like, they are. The fuck? But also I think it's hilarious that, like, they did this one, like, shitty expedition where they were like, let's just drive to the fucking border and see what the vibe is, right? You can't, like, Google, like, what does that shit look like? They pulled up and they were like, oh, fuck. They're asking for papers, turn around. And then they went back and they were like, okay, what if we ask for leave and get the right papers somehow, some way? Like, that's the shittiest fucking play. Like, this is hilarious. This is funny to me. It's so stupid that it's funny. The final expedition set forth at noon on New Year's Eve day, okay? After Luke Lea was like, hey, can I have leave for all my homies and me? And he was like, sure, this is really weird, but sure. Okay? So they were going to have leave for the next 5 days, starting January 1st. So on New Year's Eve, all 7 men piled into a clunky, brakeless, emphasis on brakeless, absent of brakes, Winton automobile belonging to the regiment with extra gasoline and blanket rolls. They headed for Liège, Belgium, where they hoped to obtain papers permitting entry into Holland, but the car broke down the first night. Of course it did. Corporal Clokey was sent back to Luxembourg to borrow the regimental Cadillac of the sister Tennessee unit, the 115th Field Artillery. Of course. Like, the Tennesseans are like, yeah, use our Cadillac. I don't give a fuck. Like, that's hilarious. I really am obsessed with this story. Pulling up in a fucking Cadillac to kidnap an abdicated world leader, like, that's crazy town. And kind of slay. Like, that's kind of sick. That's kind of iconic. Meanwhile, Riley and Johnston patched up the Winton and the party drove all night to reach Liège. There was a brief dispute with a Belgian officer over how much gasoline he could permit them, when was ultimately settled by Captain MACPHAIL's fluent French. Our boy in the MOB, okay, would be in the MOB, but not yet. He was fluent in French, which is kind of why he was enlisted in this dumb fucking mission. And so he was able to get them out of the situation where the Belgian officer was like, I'm not going to let you have that much gasoline. And apparently our boy Larry, okay, about to be MLB star, was like, let me take over. And what did Larry exactly say? Apparently, Larry MACPHAIL had pointedly reminded the Belgian officer of America's recent aid to Belgium. Like, he was like, don't question us. We helped y'all out. And the officer was like, true. And let him go. The Dutch consul in Liège could not supply entry papers for at least 6 weeks, so Luke got the bright idea of going straight to American ambassador Brand Whitlock in Brussels. After all, while still a senator, Luke had assisted Whitlock in obtaining his appointment. It proved an inspired idea, for Whitlock not only welcomed and fed the officers in Brussels, but the dinner was also fortuitously attended by none other than the Dutch ambassador himself. Luke was introduced not only as a colonel, but as a senator. Luke acknowledges that he expressly denied being a senator any longer, I'm sure. But the impressed ambassador asked the purpose of his expedition. Luke replied, quote, journalistic investigations. And this was the purpose written on the application for the Dutch papers, okay, that they needed to get in order to cross that border into neutral Holland where the Kaiser was hiding. Luke's earlier journalistic pursuits in Tennessee lent some credibility to the claim for sure, although the officials must have wondered why it took 7 uniformed officers to, quote, investigate for journalistic intentions. I die at this, okay? Apparently it's not what you know, it's who you know. They didn't know anything, but they knew some people, that's for sure. Photographs of the men were taken for their passports, each donning Lea's overcoat because theirs were too shabby. When the U.S. passports were issued by the legation clerk, it was noticed that Luke was identified as a senator. Captain Henderson advised against accepting papers with this false information, but the clerk said he was out of passport forms and assured them that the notation was harmless. This is hilarious. So many things had to happen for this to even become an attempt. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people had to mess up. A lot of people had to be dumb. And a lot of people were dumb. The only thing we can count on in this life. That afternoon, the Dutch legation visaed their passports, but Luke, given an inch and taking a mile, asked for a document specifically giving them authority to travel to Holland, in automobiles, in uniform. All 3 of those things. Holland, in car, in uniform, which is crazy town. In neutral Holland. The document received read in Dutch as follows. Valid for temporary entrance and exit by motor car. The minister resident of HM, the Queen of Holland, has the honor of requesting the custom and excise officers in Holland to give, when passing custom examination, all facilities permitted by the existing regulations to the most honorable Senator Colonel Luke Lea, who is proceeding to Holland and returned by motor car on official duty for the U.S. government, accompanied by 5 other members of the mission in uniform. Brussels, dated Brussels, January 4th, 1919, the minister resident signed von Nolhelm, okay? So you guys, this is the 4th, okay? So it's taking them 4 days to get this shit worked out. Their leave is good until tomorrow, okay? You got 1 more day left to kidnap this fool, okay? And mind you, too, think about the wording that's used. On official duty for the U.S. government, this could have been an international incident, faux pas, a clusterfuck. Like, we're just gonna believe that the U.S. government is like, no, we swear we had nothing to do with this. Like, basically invade fucking Holland, neutral Holland, go to war with Holland, then invade their ass, completely ignore the whole neutral part and pull that motherfucker out. Like, no one had said that they were gonna do that. They were like, that's crazy. Official duty for the U.S. government. Think about that, the fact that the U.S. government had to do some fucking damage control after this shit. Like, no, you guys, it wasn't, I swear, it's just some fucking idiots. Look how stupid they are. Like, literally, look, we just have idiots in our country. Like, it's okay. The little party, okay, Luke's crew, did indeed find that the Dutch document was an open sesame at the border. They entered Holland at 7 a.m. on January 5th, 1919. At Nijmegen, that is the name of this place that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. I apologize. They stopped for lunch, and one of the party later claimed that they saw a regiment of English cavalry encamped, all within 30 miles of the Kaiser's refuge. They allegedly believed that the British were quietly protecting the Kaiser. So, like, just like conspiracy theories, you know what I mean? Like, they're just sitting there, like just rising up, just getting more pissed off by just straight assumptions, which I feel like is what most people do in this country, especially when they're voting, for sure. They're like, let me just make some shit up really quick. And that's what they were doing. No, the British weren't doing that. Like, they weren't doing that, but they believed it. This seemed highly unlikely, for the Dutch had jealously guarded their neutrality throughout the war and would not have allowed foreign troops on their soil, especially as the state of war still technically continued. So, like, the fact that Luke Lea and his band of fucking circus freaks, like, were allowed to go in there in uniform and automobile is crazy. Like, that's nuts. Like, this wasn't just a normal thing. No. Like, they're neutral. In any event, all agree that while in that place that I can't pronounce, their presence attracted a small crowd, from which a boy of about 15 or 16 emerged. Interpreter, he volunteered. His name was Botter, and he spoke somewhat broken English. The soldiers dubbed him Hans and hired him. Like, my name is Botter. All right, Hans. Come on in. Hop up in the passenger seat, baby. You're our translator. He's like, period. It's Botter, by the way. Okay, whatever you say, Hans. Perfect. They told him that they would be in Holland several days and might not return to that place. He had no objection to that and only wanted to accompany the Americans and wind up in Maastricht, where they were going. At dusk, they found the Rhine bridge washed away and crossed by a ferry. However, they could not convince the ferryman to wait for their return, at which time they expected to have the Kaiser trussed up in their car. They were going to throw him in the back of this Cadillac. Obsessed. They understood, according to Luke, that without the ferry, they could only bring him back with his consent. Luke claims to have believed that, and this is the dumbest thing I've heard this entire story and yet, okay? Promise you, this will be the dumbest thing you fucking hear. He believed that he might have been able to persuade Kaiser Wilhelm II, the German Kaiser who just bounced in exile to a neutral country, to bravely, quote, face in person his accusers rather than remain a craven coward, afraid of his own people and the allied hosts of civilization. I mean, I'm convinced for sure. No, yeah, definitely going to happen. You're just going to convince him to be put on trial. I'm telling you, say what you want about Americans. We are audacious. Our men do not give a fuck about logic. In view of this assertion, one is tempted to conclude that Luke was either a fool or knew that what he proposed to do was just a stunt, which would give the folks at home a chuckle. I don't know. I think he genuinely thought this would work. There's no fucking way that you're crossing borders, getting foreign visas, lying to the queen of fucking Holland. Like, there's no way. Like, there's no way he was like, just for like laughs. Like, I hate that we protect men like that after the fact. Like, oh, maybe he was just kidding, or oh, maybe he had good intentions, oh, maybe he didn't actually think this. No, let's just assume he actually thought all of this shit. And yes, it was as dumb as it sounded, but all 7 of the other guys with him on this trip were like, this is amazing. It sounds incredible. Like, that's how politics is half the time. That's how, like, being on a subreddit is half the time. You know what I mean? Just a lot of people agreeing with the dumbest fucking thing you've ever heard in the comments, just yelling in this echo chamber at each other about how smart they are until one of their heads explodes. But whomst am I? Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not. Luke alleges, perhaps to protect his friends, that it was not until they were 16 kilometers from Amerongen that he revealed his intentions to his comrades. So this entire time, the story that they landed on after the fact was that, oh, we were doing all of this, whining and dining at the ambassador's house in Brussels, right? Like, doing all this shit, hiring a translator, like all this stuff, driving across in our fucking Cadillac for a purpose unbeknownst to any of us. Maybe, but like, come on now. I mean, the story that they stuck with is that nobody knew except for Luke what the plan was. And then 16 kilometers away from the situation, from the Kaiser, he was like, hey, by the way, we're kidnapping the Kaiser. And they all apparently were like, period, down if they get down. There's actually proof that this story is bullshit because Captain Henderson had hinted at his own knowledge in a letter to his wife 10 days earlier. But like, right, they're going to be loyal to each other. And Luke was like, I'll take the fall. The party arrived at Amerongen shortly before 8 p.m., having received directions from a townsman. Luke claimed that his plan was to take advantage of the Teutonic respect for authority by simply ordering any sentry to allow entry. Again, the blind confidence. I'm just going to order them in a very stern, condescending voice, which has gotten men very far in the world. In the legal field, I can promise you that. The amount of arguments I've heard that are substantively dog shit, but are at least permitted to be spoken aloud instead of laughed out of the courtroom. Yeah. Condescending tone of voice by a white guy. It'll get you far in life, apparently. Sure enough, he claims there was a man in a Dutch military uniform at the gate, turning his flashlight on his belt and insignia of rank. Luke used his guttural German to order admission, and the sentry just complied. So everyone, do you remember what I said about everything just having to crumble like a Nature Valley bar? Everyone's focus breaking the fuck down in the face of apparently one guy named Luke. That all had to happen for this to occur, okay? For this to even be an attempt. Their knock at the front door was answered by a porter, whom they advised they had important business with the Kaiser. So this is at the fucking castle that the Kaiser's hiding at. They're at the door. They're at the front dizzy of the Kaiser. They were ushered into the home in full U.S. uniforms. And they said, period, come on in. They were ushered into the book-lined library where they saw large carved walnut chairs and the latest newspapers and Wilhelm's stationery on a table. Their eyes also fell on several bronze ashtrays, allegedly bearing the Kaiser's monogram and crest. Soon, the owner's son, mustached Count Charles Bentinck, arrived dressed in a tailcoat. Luke, who had majored in German at Sewanee, spoke to him in that language. Bentinck replied in English and politely asked their business, as everyone had retired for the night. Luke stalled a bit and then bluffed, quote, I can reveal the object of our visit only to the Kaiser. Bentinck then retired to an adjoining room and could be heard speaking to someone. Meanwhile, Luke claims that their young Dutch interpreter fainted dead away and had to be dragged outside of the car by Lieutenant Brown. Oh my God. Luke's officers could hear Bentinck speaking to someone in the next room in guttural German or Dutch, sometimes saying Your Majesty in one of the languages, presumably. He also was talking on the telephone. During this time, a butler with a distinctive military bearing brought in ice water and cigars. Captain Henderson manifested indignation at this fare, and the butler returned with champagne. So they were like, water? That's it. I'm so offended. So they gave him champagne. Give an inch, take a mile. Bentinck had called the local mayor, in fact, okay? He apparently spoke to the Kaiser also, okay? Literally spoke to the fucking Kaiser in the next fucking room. Was like, yo, there's some guys here for you from America. And the Kaiser was probably like, don't let them in. Like, I'd be like, ooh, so this whole thing about like my secret exile in Holland, you know what I mean? Yeah, fuck them. I would like to not be found. Thank you. Thank you so much. Crazy town. They got this far. After speaking with the Kaiser, he returned to the library and told Luke that Wilhelm would not see him unless he was told of the nature of their visit. And this, Luke was not prepared to indulge to anyone but Kaiser Wilhelm. So they're at an impasse here. Okay, he's like, hey, Kaiser wants to know why you're here. What's the reason for your visit? And Luke's like, we can't tell you unless we were talking to the Kaiser. Okay, well, you're not going to see him unless you tell me why the fuck you're here. At some point, Bentinck's father, Count Goddard, the owner of the castle, joined the discussion. So they're just polling everybody, right? Like, what the fuck is this about? I don't really know what we should do here, but I fear that seeing the Kaiser is not on the list of those things, right? Of possible options, but whomst are we? After further verbal sparring, the Europeans retired to the next room again for further consultations. They were like, again, wait fucking here, boys, with your champagne and your sandwiches. Upon their return to the room, to the little library that they were kept in, they reiterated the Kaiser's refusal to see them without knowing their intent. At this point, Luke pulled out his letter, okay, from the Dutch consul in Brussels. He was like, gotcha, all right, handed it to him. Having studied the document, the Bentinks wisely inquired as to the meaning of, quote, journalistic investigations. They're the only people with a brain right now thinking this through, thinking about how fucking stupid this all sounds, right? They asked him, quote, was it a military technical term or did it mean newspaper investigation? Like, they were like, what is this? We don't really have a dictionary for stupid, so could you just explain this to us? Their questions included, quote, was it a military technical term or did it mean newspaper investigation? And the presence of you gentlemen here then is due to official business from the American government. Like, they were beside themselves. They were like, really? Also, were they from American Army intelligence or from just regular newspapers? Luke declined to elaborate or explain any of this, thus leading to more next room conferences by the frustrated Europeans. It can be surmised that they wanted to be sure that they were not dealing with some undercover diplomacy by the Americans, whose government, after all, was not technically an ally of Germany's other enemies. Wilson had urged a peace based on his 14 points, President Woodrow Wilson, okay, rather than whatever spoils the other belligerents might seek. Finally, the mayor said to the Americans that the Kaiser would see them if they gave their word of honor that they were there as representatives of President Wilson, AEF Commander General John J. Pershing, or even Colonel House. This Luke was unwilling to do, so Luke could have lied and gotten in to see the Kaiser and potentially like tried to kidnap him if he would have been okay with lying his ass off, which he had already done a million times over, but this was apparently the last straw. This he was unwilling to do. Meanwhile, some 150 to 200 Dutch troops with mounted machine guns had arrived and surrounded Lieutenant Brown and the snoozing American enlisted men waiting outside, and the translator who had passed the fuck out. Okay? I'm crying. Searchlights played on the castle. Like, the Dutch pulled up. They were, of course, just talking to you, right, in this whatever castle. But of course they called in the cavalry. What the fuck? We're neutral, bitch. Why the fuck are you here? The lieutenant decided that Sergeant Johnston's suggestion that they retrieve their pistols from beneath the car seat was not a good idea. Amazing observation, boys. Like, the guys who were in the car, okay, waiting, like, they're like, maybe we shouldn't, like, brandish weapons in this scenario. Amazing, amazing choice. Obsessed with that 1 + 1 = 2 logic. All right? Maybe put your hands up. For sure, for sure. Inside, Luke and his comrades realized that it was time to go, shook hands all around, thank you so much, and exited the castle at around 11 o'clock. Captain Henderson allegedly made the crack that such visits were an American custom. And they let them go. The Tennesseans slowly drove through the Dutch soldiers and then made tracks for home. A short time later, our future MLB executive, Larry MacPhail, told Luke that he had a souvenir for him and the others. Before he could remove it from his pocket, Luke told him he didn't want to know about it. In fact, it was one of the little ashtrays they had observed in the library, and it was a souvenir. It depicted a small German shepherd dog smoking a long-stemmed pipe and was simply a cheap little German handmade for tourists, okay? It wasn't even like, had like the Kaiser seal on it. It wasn't like some big like personal effect. It was just some fucking regular ashtray, okay? But to them, right, big deal. They dropped their young interpreter off at Maastricht as promised, and then one of the cars was involved in 2 collisions. Oh my God. They couldn't drive right. They ended up getting in car accidents. Learn how to fucking drive if you're going to try to kidnap a Kaiser and then fail and then run home. They got in 2 car accidents, running into a Dutch house, and knocking a young man off his bicycle. They offered a 20-franc note to the unhurt Dutchman, but he refused it 3 times, earning the description from Luke of, quote, a new, hitherto unknown species of European man. Like the fact that he was refusing money, they were like, what the fuck? That's weird. Meanwhile, while our ragtag crew of morons, American bred, Tennessean made, USA, we're headed back to base, okay? Going, wow, we should really get back ASAP because like our leave's almost up and we, hopefully no one will talk about this or ever find out, right? Yeah, well, meanwhile, the Kaiser's entourage had discovered the theft of the tiny ashtray. This entire stupid, bungled operation may never have even come to light and would have just been like a weird thing that no one ever talked about. It would have never come to light if our boy Larry MacPhail, future MLB exec, wouldn't have taken that ashtray, okay? And to spoil it for you, that ashtray that he stole from the Kaiser's exile castle that fateful day in January 1919 would stay displayed on his desk as an MLB executive through his entire career, to the Reds, the Dodgers, and the Yankees. Deep in American territory, baby. And Larry MacPhail was like, you want to hear the story about that ashtray? Like, he had it out in the open. That's fucking hilarious. And that is, I think, might make it worthy of the souvenir, despite the fact that it was the only fucking thing that blew this whole thing up. Like, in hindsight, it is pretty cool, right? But, like, also, you're lucky you got away with your life. Okay? Why did they get away with their lives and they didn't like, I don't know, they weren't hanged for treason or some shit like that? Well, let's read on. Let's find out, okay? The Kaiser's entourage had discovered the theft of the tiny ashtray, okay? This tiny fucking ashtray. And telephoned to Arnhem and the other town I can't pronounce, Nijmegen, in an attempt to head the thieves off, but too late. Wilhelm was amused, apparently. Kaiser Wilhelm, quote, outside 10 policemen, inside a robbery, he commented. He's kind of funny. That's kind of funny. The culprits had already crossed the border, and 36 hours later were back at their regiment. Luke Lea was just in time to mount his horse and lead the review of his unit. They were 12 hours past their leave time. In an apparent attempt to distract attention from his still mysterious mission, Luke told his commanding officer that he had discovered some vital information which he wanted to report in Paris to President Wilson's aide, Colonel E.M. House. His general would not fall for that, but allowed him to write his findings to House. Luke then concocted a letter to House in which he asserted, among other things, that Britain and Belgium were colluding against other nations. Okay, just like, again, the assumptions that we're going off of, literally zero evidence. Belgium planned to acquire part of Holland. What the fuck? German and Dutch merchants desired a deal between Holland, Germany, Russia, and Japan in opposition to England, France, Italy, and the US, among other stupid conspiracy theories that he was just going to write in a letter and send. out because apparently his tomfoolery wasn't done. Also, that practically all Germans still loved the Kaiser and Field Marshal von Hindenburg. Where is this info? Where are you getting this info? Who knows? From his fucking brain. He threw in that he had some facts relative to the Dutch army and radio communications and also purported to know the military status of the former Kaiser. Lies. Just lying. If indeed this preposterous missive was ever sent or received, it met with the fate which it deserved. No answer or even acknowledgement was ever sent. Thank God. God bless. Luke decided to at least attend the peace conference at Versailles as a spectator and obtained leave to do so. Again, enough of the leaves, okay? Maybe, grant some keeps. We're going to keep him here instead of letting him leave. My God. And also it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go to Versailles to like witness the peace talks. Like there's letting everybody in there, huh? Using bluff and connections once again, he managed to be admitted as a fucking witness to the fucking major peace talks. I cannot with this man. By this time, the press had already published accounts of the escapade, and the Kaiser's suite lodged a formal complaint with the Americans, complaining not only of the stolen ashtray, but that the visit made the Kaiser nervous. Like, the Kaiser was like, what the fuck was that about? What's going on here? It probably made a lot of people nervous, for the new Republican German government was simultaneously dealing with rumors that the German crown prince, who had also taken refuge in Holland, might be kidnapped by right-wing Germans. So, like, everyone was, like, on their fucking toe. Like, this was not the time for Luke to go mask off site like crazy. This was not the time for Luke to like stir the pot, because the pot was already bubbling. Okay, everyone was already on their fucking trigger happy. Like, the fact that Luke got away with his life after pulling this shit is crazy. The US Army, because of the Kaiser's complaint, like, hey, can I have my fucking ashtray back? And also, what the fuck was that about? That little visit, not very fun. And also, your boys are weirdos. The U.S. Army began an investigation of the affair on January 26th, 1919. So only a few days after, okay, this whole thing went down. And it continued for several weeks. They soon obtained the only real information which Luke and the others had obtained from the trip. That the Kaiser was neither ill nor insane, and that he had a loyal retinue with him in Ameringen. So like, that's the only intel they actually got from this fucking journalistic investigation excursion. Okay, be serious. Several charges were considered against Luke. First, that he had violated the general order which forbade entry into neutral countries without permission from the Army General Headquarters. What the fuck? Kind of a big deal. Luke replied that the order was intended only for enlisted men, and he had acted under his orders because he was an officer. Okay. He pointed out, he's such a lawyer about this too. I mean, listen, say what you want about lawyers. We can get out of some fucking crazy shit. Exhibit A, right here. He pointed out the apparently inconsistent general order, which said that officers could go anywhere on leave except Paris. So he's pointing out inconsistencies with the terminology used. He's lawyering his fucking ass off. I'm crying. The second charge was using government automobiles on leave. Luke countered that this was a universal custom by officers and noted that General Pershing also followed it. Luke threatened to call Pershing as a witness. I love him. Unfortunately, I'm loving him so far. I'm loving him right now. This seemed to squelch any desire to prosecute Luke on the two charges. Damn. So it worked. He was like, literally like, call my bluff. I will call him as a witness. And they were like, fuck, we really don't want this. We don't really want this. We don't want this to like be a thing. You know what I mean? And it's also super embarrassing. Like, I feel like less so to do with Luke's defense, you know what I mean? Like his counterpoints. I think they were like, this would be fucking embarrassing as hell if everyone knew about this. Like, an unsanctioned kidnapping attempt of the Kaiser, I feel like would not go over well. Like, maybe let's keep this under wraps. God damn it, right? However, despite all of that, okay, the next day, an investigator did advise Luke that the Kaiser was preferring that the U.S. actually file charges and pursue, okay, and like essentially a trial, like charge your ass with something, because the visit had made him nervous and that the ashtray is fucking gone, okay? Like, y'all stole an ashtray, like you should be in trouble for this, okay? When questioned about the ashtray, Luke replied that all he knew was hearsay, quote unquote, and thus inadmissible in a trial. That seemed to satisfy the investigator for a while. That's not a good answer, by the way, okay? Just because hearsay, statements, information, it might be inadmissible at a trial. It has to be like rendered inadmissible, and also statements by the accused, like, is it one of the exceptions to hearsay? Babes, like, that's not, don't say that to like a cop, or don't talk to cops, but like if you're going to say something like that, don't say, oh, it's hearsay, so there you go, catch 22, you're done. No, that shouldn't work, but it worked for Luke, but it's not going to work for you, okay? Okay. That seemed to satisfy the investigator for a while, so he left. Shortly thereafter, Luke had lunch with our boy Larry MacPhail, okay? Future MLB exec, who admitted to the theft of the ashtray. Because I'm sure Luke was like, what the fuck is he talking about, ashtray? Was that their fucking souvenir? And Larry was like, oh yeah, period, I have it in my bag. Luke asked to be Larry's legal counsel, and Larry accepted. Therefore, when the investigation resumed, Luke was able to say that his knowledge was privileged as gained from his client. Ugh. I'm tired. The prosecution then fizzled out. But this was the U.S. Army, and some response to the international incident had to be made. The result was a formal letter to Luke from the Adjutant General of the American Expeditionary Force sent at General Pershing's command, finding that Luke's actions, although, quote, free from deception, okay, loose term for that, were, quote, amazingly indiscreet, and he should have never entered Holland without orders. Like, what the fuck were you doing? The more serious offense, however, it said, was making the visit without authority of the president, as its purpose might have been misunderstood in some quarters, as indeed it was, and might have caused disastrous political and military consequences around the globe. Duh. Like, oh my God. Some months later, a general told Luke that the Pershing's private comment was, quote, I'd have given a year's pay to have been able to take Luke's trip into Holland and to have entered the castle of Count Bentinck without invitation, end quote. So General Pershing was basically like, damn, wish I would have been him. Like that, because they were like, no, like people wanted, okay, this to happen, but they just knew that they couldn't actually do it. Crazy. General Pershing ultimately had the final say and let Luke and the others off with only letters of reprimand placed in their service records. Nothing else happened to them. Not even a slap on the wrist. Like a letter and a damn, that's crazy. That's it. That is it. They were ultimately honorably discharged after the war, went back home, peace out. No problems. So what happened, okay, when all these boys went home? Well, we know, as I told you, what Larry ended up doing, okay? Back home in Tennessee, we know that this story did end up coming out. It made headlines, especially in Tennessee, in the Tennessean, okay, of their local boys almost getting the job done. Like, they were proud of this, okay? Of course they were. Of course they were. Especially the fact that they didn't get in trouble, like, period. They must not have done anything wrong. But after the war, Luke found himself in more serious trouble back in America, okay? He couldn't finagle his way out of being punished for other things he did quite so well as he finagled in Europe, okay? He was real smooth talker, was able to get off with a letter of reprimand from fucking General Pershing with no other consequences. And so he was like, let me go on a run really quick. Let me see how well I can get away with shit back home. And the answer was not well. Fucking not well. But to start off, before we get into the illegal shit that he was doing and then totally got caught for, we're going to go into why I think he's a weirdo. Like a weirdo where I'm like, get the fuck, you know what I mean? Like, not just, oh, haha, you're eccentric, what a crazy life, but also like, get the fuck away from me and also small children, right? He was first married before the war, okay, mind you. He was born April 12, 1879, okay? He was 39 when the whole Kidnap the Kaiser plot went down, right? Okay, so he's pretty old. He's like pretty fucking old. He got married in 1906 to a woman named Mary Louise Warner, okay? Until her death in 1918. I don't know how she died, but she died, okay? She actually died when he was on his way to France. Okay, like in the war. Okay, super sad. Tears, very sad. He gets home in 1920 and marries immediately Mary Louise Warner's younger sister. Ew. Until his death in 1945. Ew. I don't like that. He had 5 children. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That's bizarre. That's creepy. That's weird. It was the times. In 1918, 1920, those were the times. I don't like those times. If those were the times, then fuck the times. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But Completely an aside, has nothing in relation to like everything else he did. Let's get into all the shit that he got into. After the close of the war, Luke returned to Nashville and resumed operation of his newspaper, okay, the Tennessean, and ended up buying up a bunch of other newspapers, okay, that were successful around to make money, okay? Going into the roaring 20s, all right? Let's do it. We're going to make some cash. We're going to make some moolah. In the 1920s, Luke was a major investor in the Nashville investment banking firm of Caldwell and Company, due in part to his friendship with its founder, Rogers Caldwell. When accusations of corruption were subsequently made about the bank, Luke and his associates became the subject of rumor that they too were corrupt, which was correct. Luke was indicted in North Carolina with others, including his eldest son, like father, like son, for bank fraud resulting from the 1930 collapse of the Central Bank and Trust Company of Asheville, North Carolina, a bank with which he had become affiliated through his connection with Caldwell and Company. Both Luke and his son were tried in North Carolina in 1931. Essentially, what happened after the Roaring 20s? What do we know? Depression. Okay, depression. This bank failed, and it turned out that they looked into these transactions, these investigators did, and it was like, Luke was just like pilfering money out of this fucking bank, okay? Pretty simple like that, okay? Him and his eldest son. Fraud. Bank fraud. Okay, bank fraud. Both Luke and his son were convicted on 3 of 7 counts. Luke was sentenced to 6 to 10 years in prison. Hard time, baby, okay? Hard time. After the Luke's appeals were exhausted, they petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari, okay, to basically reverse their convictions. Like, please. And that's how this case ended up coming before my eyeballs, all right, this guy's name at first, because I saw the petition for writ, and I was like, wait, why is this connected to a kidnapping case? That's weird. Yeah. The Supreme Court denied it. So both Lea's, okay, Luke and his son, reported for imprisonment at Raleigh in North Carolina in May 1934. Luke received a parole in April 1936, and he received a full pardon in June of 1937. Through the end of his life, Luke maintained that he and his son were wrongly prosecuted and convicted, and that the prosecution was political in nature, with Luke being made the scapegoat for the Central Bank and Trust failure by his Republican foes in North Carolina and Tennessee. Luke died on November 18th, 1945 at the Vanderbilt University Hospital in Nashville at the age of 66. He was buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Nashville. And I'm not honeybee sure why he died, right? Shit happens, like when you party hard, I guess. I don't know why he died, but he died, okay, or how he died, I guess. And, more importantly, okay, what was Kaiser Wilhelm doing? What happened with him? For those who don't know this lore, okay? He had a less dramatic post-war life than Luke. Shocker. He lived in Holland until his death on June 4th, 1941. He was 82 years old. Insane of a conversation starter is that. Oh, love this ashtray. What is this, German? You want to hear something really quick? Crazy town. Larry MacPhail died in 1975, leaving the ashtray to a grandson. Today, nearly a century after it was stolen, the ashtray is said to be stored in a safe deposit box at an undisclosed bank somewhere in the U.S. And that is the story of the failed kidnapping attempt of Kaiser Wilhelm II by a ragtag group of Tennessean soldiers led by one Luke Lea, a criminal, an eccentric, and one confident motherfucker. And my rebuttal for today's episode is that if you do everything with the blind, unyielding confidence and arrogance of a mediocre white guy with a uniform on, you can destroy or save the world. And even if you fail, you'll have a great story attached to it. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Rebuttal Podcast. I have another episode coming at you literally within a few days' time, so keep your eyes out for that. I've already filmed it. I pinky swear. I love you guys so damn much. Thank you for supporting. Subscribe, like, comment, whatever. And follow me on Insta. It's like fun over there. It's like a good time. I like reading your DMs. Okay. Love you. Bye.